There is a quiet ache familiar to so many parents, a pain you rarely share with anyone. It's the realization that your children, once so small and dependent, are now grown. They have changed not only in body, but in their attitude toward the very people who raised them. Perhaps this pain is familiar to you. Perhaps you, like so many others, gave your entire life to your children. You traded sleepless nights for vigils by their bedside when they had a fever. You set aside your own plans for their needs. You chose silence over arguments to keep the peace. You did everything possible, and sometimes the impossible, to give them the very best. And now, when all you ask for is a little attention, respect, and acknowledgement, you are met with a cold shoulder and indifference. You try to offer advice, and you're cut off mid-sentence. You want to share a thought, and you're ignored. Sometimes they even correct you, as if all your life experience has been rendered worthless. You start to ask yourself, where did I go wrong? In that moment, you might try to demand respect back. You remind them of everything you've done. You ask for recognition. You point to the years of sacrifice. But more often than not, it doesn't work. And what began as pain turns into resentment. The search for connection becomes a battle of wills. Here is what one of the greatest sages, Confucius, had to say. When a river gives away too much of its water, it becomes little more than mud. When a father gives away too much of himself, his foundation crumbles. In these words lies a profound truth. When you sacrifice yourself completely for the sake of attachment, you teach others to overlook you. Not out of malice, but because people value presence, not just endless kindness. But here is what you may not have heard. Respect can be reclaimed. And better yet, it doesn't depend on your children's willingness to give it. It all starts with you. Yes, you can still change how they see you. You can earn their respect without shouting, arguing, or humbling yourself. But to do so, you will have to change. This message is about shifting that dynamic. It's about reconnecting with your own dignity. You will learn 7 lessons, inspired by the wisdom of Confucius, that can completely alter the relationship you have with your children. 7 steps that will require you to work on yourself, not on them. These teachings are not just tips. They are deep, simple, and powerful truths. If you decide to walk this path, you will understand that respect was never lost. It was simply dormant, waiting for you to remember who you are. This is not a criticism of your children. It is an invitation to come home to yourself, to the person you were before you became silent and accommodating, before you came to believe that love meant accepting everything, even disrespect. You will realize that while silence can be noble, sometimes it is simply submission. You will see that giving is a beautiful thing, but to give without acknowledgement is to empty yourself. You will remember that living for yourself is not selfishness, but a powerful example for others. And most importantly, your children will see that a relationship can be rebuilt, not through demands, but through the quiet authority of someone who respects themselves. So take a deep breath and let's begin. We are starting with the first step. Step 1. Stop seeking their approval. For a long time, you thought that pleasing them was the best way to keep their love, and that's understandable. From the day they were born, you did everything to protect, feed, and support them. Over time, it became second nature to give them everything they needed, even at the cost of your own peace. You wanted to be the understanding parent, the one who avoided conflict. You gave in on the small things and then on the more important ones. You forgave their mistakes, tolerated their harsh words, and ignored their disrespect. You did it all in the name of love. But the constant effort to please comes at a high price. It undermines your authority. The more you concede, the further you move from the very things that inspire respect. Because respect is born from balance, not from submission. It thrives where there are boundaries and firmness. By offering nothing but acceptance, even in the face of disrespect, you teach them that you don't need to be taken seriously. Confucius said that he who tries to please everyone will ultimately lose himself. Perhaps that is what happened to you. In trying to be the understanding parent, you stopped being a guidepost. You became the one who always yields and agrees, the one who smiles even when it hurts. But it doesn't have to be this way. You can be firm without being aggressive. You can be loving without being a pushover. You can love them and at the same time, stand your ground. This isn't about raising your voice. On the contrary, the kind of firmness that earns respect is quiet and calm. It starts with learning to say no when you need to, with refusing to tolerate behavior that wounds you. Stop constantly making excuses for them, and stop feeling guilty for disagreeing. You might ask yourself, but if I start insisting on my own way, won't my child pull away even more? It's a valid fear, but the truth is, if they pull away because you've taken a dignified stand, that is not your failure. It is merely a reflection of the pattern you've allowed for too long. And if their love is real, the distance will be temporary. Children who truly love you ultimately admire a parent who knows their own worth. Start with something simple. I deserve to be treated with respect. I won't accept that tone of voice. Let's talk about this when we've both calmed down. And then, be silent. Don't over-explain or despair. Simply hold your ground. At first, this shift might feel uncomfortable, but over time, it will become your strength. Your children will realize that you no longer need their approval to feel whole. You have become someone who knows their own value. Remember, a parent who begs for love is often forgotten, but a parent who stands on their own 2 feet is eventually remembered with respect. You don't need to be demanding. You just need to remember who you are. Step 2. Don't argue. Lead by example. We want to be respected. We try to explain, to prove our point. After all, we've done so much for them, it seems only fair that they should at least listen. But when that doesn't happen, when our children interrupt or ignore us, our first reaction is to try to make them understand through force. We argue, we plead, we raise our voices. But as Confucius said, the man who must shout to be heard has already lost his authority. In those words lies a deep wisdom. True respect isn't born in arguments. It comes from your posture, your presence, your quiet dignity. You've probably been through this yourself. You tried to calmly share your point of view, but the conversation escalated into a fight. In the end, nobody won, and you only drifted further apart. This happens because children often aren't ready to listen, especially when they feel pressured. The more we try to convince them, the more they resist. Instead of arguing, simply live what you believe. Stay calm, take care of yourself, be available, but not imposing. Over time, this kind of behavior builds something far more powerful than any argument. It creates a reference point. Your children may not agree with your opinions, but they cannot ignore your quiet dignity. There is an old story about a wise father named Henry. His adult children had started treating him with a certain irony, laughing at his old-fashioned traditions. He tried to argue with them, shouting, "Have you forgotten everything I've done for you?" But one day he grew tired and simply fell silent. Not out of resentment, but with a sense of peace. He just started living his life. He tended his garden, wrote down his thoughts, and listened without interrupting. Over time, his children began to change. They started coming to him, asking for his advice, and listening. Through his silence, Henry had regained what he'd lost, the commanding presence that inspires respect. This is what it means to lead by example. You don't have to respond to every provocation or correct every mistake. You need to live with conviction, care for yourself, and maintain your composure. The silence of a person who is at peace with themselves is louder than any shout. It shows that you have nothing to prove. You already know who you are, and gradually your children will notice it too. Step 3. Reclaim your emotional independence. One of the heaviest feelings for a parent is realizing your children are drifting away. The silence, the distance, the indifference. The phone calls become less frequent, the visits grow shorter, the text messages are brief. You begin to realize that you are living your life waiting for their attention, and that waiting weighs on you. You feel that all your love and effort are being ignored. This is how emotional dependency is born. It creeps in when your life starts to revolve around the reactions of other people. When you tie your self-worth to someone else's approval, this makes you vulnerable. You start living not for yourself, but for external validation. Confucius wisely noted, "He who needs applause to live will perish in the first silence." This phrase calls on us to look within. You can love your children deeply without making them the center of your universe. You can want their company without despairing in their absence. The problem isn't the feelings themselves, but getting lost in them. The problem is building your life so completely around the role of a parent That when the children leave the nest, all that remains is an empty space. But that emptiness can be transformed. There was a woman who had devoted herself entirely to her children. When they grew up and started their own lives, she was left alone, in a state of perpetual waiting. Every Sunday, she would set the dining room table for a big family dinner, just like in the old days. But no one would come, and every Sunday became a fresh wound. One day, she decided she had to change. She started going on hikes, signed up for a painting class, and reconnected with old friends from her bridge club. A curious thing happened. Her children started coming back, not out of guilt, but because the mother who had seemed so fragile was strong again. There was a spark back in her eyes and it drew them in. This is the key. When you stop being dependent, you start being inspiring. People seek you out not from pity or obligation, but for the simple pleasure of being in your company. And even if your children don't return in the way you hope, you will still find peace, because you will have reclaimed your emotional autonomy. This doesn't mean closing your heart. It means strengthening it. Your well-being should not depend on another person. You deserve happiness on your own terms. Fill your time with things that bring you joy, and the world around you will shift. You will no longer be a hostage to the reactions of others, and that is freedom. Step 5. Set boundaries and hold them. One of the hardest things for a loving person to do is to say stop, to set a limit, to draw a line in the sand, especially when it comes to your own children. Out of fear of being rejected or seeming too harsh, you've given in. A sharp tone here, a dismissive comment there. Gradually, you began to accept what you once never would have. Silent concessions, ignored aggression, anything to avoid a conflict. But the silence that avoids conflict only feeds disrespect. As Confucius taught, an unmarked boundary invites a trespasser. If you don't show others where the line is, they will cross it, not because they are bad people, but because you have taught them they can through your own tolerance. Setting boundaries is about protecting the relationship from becoming toxic. It's about showing that true love requires mutual respect. Boundaries are not set with anger, but with calm consistency. Think about how many times you've heard something you didn't deserve. How many times you've put up with sarcasm or judgment. Now think about what you did in response. If the answer is nothing, then perhaps that is where the problem lies. You don't need to fight or shout. You need to be firm. Look your child in the eye and say, "I deserve to be respected," and then back it up with action. A wise man named Robert once told his son, who kept interrupting him, "I have conversations with people who listen. When you're ready to do that, we can talk again." And he remained silent for several days. When his son returned, something had changed. Not in the father's voice, but in the son's eyes. He saw his father as a whole person again. Boundaries don't push people away. They teach them how to stay. When you start to define your space, you may meet with resistance. But that is part of the process. And a boundary must be held consistently. Children who love you will learn to respect the space you've created. Giving is one of the most noble gestures. Giving your time, your money, your advice, your support. It's what parents do from day one. But when giving becomes constant and automatic, it stops being a gift. It becomes an expectation. This is why so many parents feel exhausted. Not tired of loving, but tired of giving everything and receiving so little in return. You offer a hand, and they already expect something from it. You help, and in return, you get criticism or silence. The more you give without thanks, the more you train them to expect it. Confucius taught that a gift offered endlessly without gratitude loses its virtue. It becomes a vice. Love knows how to say no. Mature love understands that to give constantly without reciprocity is to diminish yourself. One father was always helping his children. One day he overheard his son saying, "Well, it's his duty. It's not like he has anything better to do with his retirement." Those words wounded him deeply. On that day, he understood that his generosity had been taken for granted. He changed his approach, not with anger, but with clarity. He started saying, "I am happy to help when I see effort and respect from you." And his children began to listen more. Not because he was making threats, but because for the first time, they saw him put himself first. It's a great mistake to think that love requires you to give endlessly, even in the face of ingratitude. Give from the heart, but also give with wisdom. Pay attention to how your help is received. If there is no acknowledgement, have the courage to say no. The one who loves you will understand. Step 6. Build a life beyond them. There is a quiet trap that devoted parents fall into. They forget about themselves. You put your dreams on hold so they could have theirs. You set aside your own desires and hobbies. And for a while it feels right and noble. But the years go by, the children grow up, and they build their own lives. And you are left waiting for phone calls and visits. When they don't come, you feel forgotten, and an emptiness sets in. Confucius said, "The parent who revolves around their children smothers them, but the one who revolves around their own life inspires them." Love that has turned into dependency suffocates freedom. Your children were not meant to fill every corner of your life. You have a right to a life that doesn't hinge on someone else's attention. A life with your own interests, friendships, and moments of joy. One woman, after her children left home, lived in a state of waiting. That waiting turned into a deep sadness. Then she decided to change. She signed up for a pottery class, started taking morning walks in the park, and met new people at the local senior center. Gradually, she started to smile again, and her children started visiting more often. They wanted to see her because she now had a light in her eyes. She had transformed from someone who was waiting into someone who was living. To build a life apart from your children does not mean abandoning them. It means showing them and yourself that you are a whole person, that your time did not stop in the past. This choice begins with something small. Doing something for yourself, just for the sheer pleasure of it. Gradually, you will find that you don't need someone else to feel complete. You are still a father. You are still a mother. But you are also so much more. You are a complete human being. Loving your children is a beautiful thing, but loving yourself is also essential. When you live with joy and purpose, you become an inspiration, and respect follows naturally. Step 7. Forgive, but don't erase yourself. No pain cuts as deeply as the pain caused by someone you love. A harsh word, an ungrateful act, a cold gesture. You take a deep breath and you forgive. Not out of weakness, but because you know that holding on to a grudge is self-destructive. Forgiveness is liberating and healing. But here's the crucial part. Forgiveness is not the same as self-erasure. To forgive does not mean pretending it never happened. It does not mean allowing the same wound to be opened again and again. Confucius said that to forgive is to let go of the stone, but not to step on the same thorn again. This phrase reminds us that forgiveness is an act of liberation, not submission. You can forgive with all your heart, but at the same time, you can set a boundary. Many parents confuse forgiveness with an obligation to endure anything. But over time, this doesn't lead to reconciliation. It leads to the erosion of your own identity. True forgiveness does not ask you to wound yourself to preserve a connection. It asks you to heal and then to decide what needs to change. A man named Leo had endured his son's coldness for years. He always said that he forgave him, but nothing ever changed. One day he wrote his son a letter, not with accusations, but with an honest explanation of his feelings. He said gently but firmly, "I forgive you for everything, but I can no longer pretend that it doesn't hurt me." He delivered the letter and then stepped back. He stopped being constantly available. And for the first time, his son felt his absence not as a punishment, but as a lesson. A few months later, he returned, a different, more humble person. Not because his father had made demands, but because his father had finally shown that he had needs of his own. Yes, forgive. Free yourself from the pain. But do not let that mean a return to the way things were. After forgiveness, something has to change. If it doesn't, the greatest act of love might just be distance, a distance that preserves your dignity. Now that you have walked through these 7 teachings, perhaps something inside you has stirred. Perhaps you remembered the days you wanted to be seen, but were overlooked. And you realized how hard you tried, believing that love alone was enough to earn respect. But the truth is, love is the fertile soil, but respect is the seed that must be planted in it. And that seed needs space, care, and firmness to grow. Respect is not born from submission. It blossoms when a loving person first values themselves. You do not need to change your children. You need to rediscover yourself, your voice, your value, your place in the world. This reunion requires not force but presence, the presence of someone who knows what they deserve. You can begin right now. You can stop seeking approval. Lead by example, not by words. Stop waiting and start building a life that fills you up. Set boundaries. Give with intention. And forgive without losing yourself. Do it calmly, without rush and without guilt. This is not about moving away from your children, but about moving closer to yourself. And when that happens, the world around you will shift in a powerful way. The voice that was ignored will be heard, not because you shouted, but because you remembered who you are. As Confucius said, the person who walks a path of truth does not need to be followed. They are respected from a distance. Let these words stay with you. And when this message ends, take a deep breath and say to yourself, now I remember. Now I am me again. If this teaching has touched your heart, please share it with others who might need to hear these truths. Remember, respect begins within. Be well, and until we meet again.